Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the January meeting of the Board of Early Education and Care. Happy New Year. I hope the new year has started off on a positive note for everyone here and listening today. Today's agenda reflects our shared commitment to addressing critical priorities. We'll be voting on the FY25 Childcare Financial Assistance reimbursement rate increase, which continues our efforts to align reimbursement rates with the true cost of care. We'll also discuss and vote on the FY25 Student Loan Repayment Program, an initiative that prioritizes recruitment and retention of a diverse and committed early educator workforce. Additionally, we'll take a closer look at the key mental and behavioral health initiatives which are vital to supporting the well-being of children, families, and educators. And last, we'll reflect, we're actually at the midway point of the year, we'll reflect on the accomplishments to date. I want to acknowledge two of my colleagues, Dr. Kim Lucas and Jamel Lee, who have joined us by phone today. And with that, I will hand it to the Secretary for remarks.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm still falling out. Forgive me. Let me just first echo your Happy New Year sentiments and just name that I see the new year as an opportunity for reflection, as well as an occasion to commit to new heights and recommit to existing ones. I want to just sort of lift up the past calendar year and name that there is so much to be proud of and excited for in the early education sector. And I say that not to indicate any degree of complacency, but more to underscore the fact that there is momentum and that we intend to continue it. Part of that momentum exists in the interagency task force. It was an honor to sit alongside my labor and economic development colleagues at the last meeting and update my board colleagues and the broader community on progress. We are inching up on the 1-year anniversary of the signing of the executive order which established the task force. We intend first to deliver the report, which is coming, I promise. I repeat, I promise it is coming. And then in short order, articulate some specific next steps around how we intend to continue the collaborative work that has happened over the past almost year with such success. Very much look forward to that effort going forward. The beginning of the year also brings with it the important work of building the governor's budget. We're very much in the throes of finalizing that effort. Folks who know me well know that my experience is mostly anchored in a couple of decades of work in the K-12 space. Suffice to say that the substance of building a budget well cuts across all sectors, notably elements like responsiveness, embracing input and feedback, innovation, and centering who's at the core of our why, children and families, are a few of the important ingredients, and I feel confident that these ingredients and more are featured in what's coming together in H1. That is all.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
With that, I'll turn it over to the Commissioner for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. And we are looking forward to the Governor's State of the Commonwealth later this week and to the release of the budget, and remain incredibly grateful for the support that Early Education and Care and EEC as an agency has received from this administration. Just wanted to add a little bit of my perspectives on the task force as well, from my seat and the opportunity to work with our colleagues across state government. And as much as I am looking forward to the release of our year 1 report, which will coincide around the first anniversary of the executive order being signed, the real magic, I think, is in the work that's happened. And you saw that a little bit here at our board meeting in December, where we have the Secretary of Workforce Development really understanding the challenges and the solutions that are needed within the early education and care workforce. And we have our Economic Development Secretary talking about childcare and early education as one of the most important investments we can make for economic competitiveness. And I have to say I've been absolutely blown away and grateful for all of our agencies and secretariats showing up for childcare over this last year. The work to really think across the agencies, and I'm not sure you can capture that magic in this report. So as much as I'm looking forward to that, I also wanted to just highlight some of the work that we've experienced with the other secretaries really looking deep into their worlds and thinking about how those resources can be leveraged for our sector, and the knowledge that has been gained over the past year. So all of our partners that participated in the learning sessions, all of the work that our consultants did to look at other states, our secretaries across state government have been very ambitious students about learning about the early education and care sector so that they can bring their teams and their resources as this task force continues. So looking forward to that report, but really looking forward to continuing what has been a deeply meaningful set of work and at least a couple more years as we continue to build on learnings of the last year. I think some of that was really on display. Last week I had the opportunity to participate in a legislative briefing that was convened by United Way of Mass Bay Shared Services Initiative that was lifting up family childcare. It was at the State House, and it was the first week in January on a cold day, and the room was overflow. And that was amazing. So when we talk about people showing up for early education and care and childcare these days, I think that was really, so I want to thank our partners at the United Way for the work they've done. They have created an initiative that is supporting family childcare as businesses and entrepreneurs and as economic development in their community. And what is so incredibly unique and awesome about the work that they're doing is that they're supporting work on the ground with individual family child care providers to help support them to become businesses, to market their businesses, to become fully enrolled, to really contribute to the local economy and the communities in which they're working. And then they've done something else too, which I think is really important, which is studied the solutions and studied the successes of the work they've done so that the rest of us can learn from them and figure out how to take those things to scope. And we are incredibly lucky here on the Board of Early Education and Care because one of the primary researchers on that evaluation was Dr. Kim Lucas. So I know you're joining us virtually, Dr. Lucas, but I was hoping you might be willing to share for just maybe 2 minutes some of the key findings from that research as we look to continue to lift up family child care and support them as the critical businesses they are for our communities. I think we as a board also have an opportunity to learn from the work they've done in shared services to build this community around family child care. So Dr. Lucas, are you able to come off of mute and share a little bit from the study findings?
Yes, totally. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner, for ceding some of your time to me and this sharing this work. And I'll just start out with a huge thanks to all of the organizations, all of the coaches and trainers, and all of the family child care provider participants who shared their experiences with myself and Dr. Wendy Robeson from Wellesley College to be able to put this report out. And also shout out to the United Way for really inviting us in at this research practice partnership to really be able to uplift some of the findings. For all of you, I think I'd like to share 3 big findings and that really emerged. There's many more, and I'm sure Melinda Weber at the United Way would be happy to share the details of them, but I'll give you some high-level overview. I think first of all, we're seeing some early impact in programs such as the shared services program. And that looks like a lot of different things. So for the family child care participants, they report feeling confident in stepping into their business and entrepreneurial roles and feeling much more prepared to provide high quality and sustainable FCC businesses for the Commonwealth. And what that looks like, right, is reporting from our licensors, reporting from our organizations saying, wow, these folks are really ready to step into this role. In addition, there's been just so much excitement around programs like shared services, so much so that they are oversubscribed and over-enrolled and have no capacity to bring in new folks at this point in time because there's just too much excitement. The word of mouth has traveled immensely, and there's great demand for more expansion of shared services. And then finally, in terms of impact, we're also seeing and hearing from some family child care providers in their ability to almost immediately open more slots and almost immediately fill slots that they had open because they are being able to be found. Their business practices are just that much, stepped up. Their ability to communicate and market their work, their high quality work, is really out there. And so folks are seeing that folks are available and ready to bring in children into these slots, and folks are really bringing their children to these folks. Second big thing, I think there's two big challenges that persist for shared services, so I want to highlight these. One is an increasing issue around the digital divide and our understanding and need for technological challenges. As we move towards systems that are more digital, I think there's issues in terms of supporting both technology but also digital literacy. And there's a wide range of folks who are out there, folks who can already make their TikTok videos, but also folks who have trouble saving their passwords, right? And so we want to be able to support all of these folks. And what are we doing in terms of that support? Second, in terms of challenges, is really understanding how we provide equitable both material and financial resources across sites and across cohorts. We had the fortune of talking with folks from Boston and from the Merrimack Valley, and we saw a lot of variation in the resources and supports that folks were receiving, depending on the site, depending on the year and cohort. And finally, I'll just end with the biggest learning that we had. The relationships that are local, that are trusting, that are both culturally and linguistically supportive of our family child care providers are the foundation upon which all of these impacts have been made. And so once again, a huge shout out to our local organizations, our local trainers and educators and coaches who are supporting family child care participants in these programs, because they know the field so well, and it shows that folks are really coming out of these programs with a much greater sense of understanding higher quality and the ability to really sustain their business practices, not just in the immediate term, but hopefully for the longer term as well. And again, thanks everyone for giving me some time to share those findings.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas. I just, we're really excited to be able to dig further into the findings, and as the agency continues to develop its own capacity to really be responding to the unique needs of our family child care providers, whether it's in licensing revisions or rate increases, or across our own staffing capacity, new capital investment programs. We've been really committed to making sure that we're building resources that are tailored to the unique needs and experiences of family child care providers. So studies like these are really helpful for our team and our work going forward. So we're grateful and look forward to continued partnership with you in the United Way as well. Just a final reminder that today is the last day for our EEC scholarship program. So you can find information on our website. If you haven't applied yet, you still have time. Very short amount of time, but we are working as hard as we can to make sure we're getting that word out and reaching as many educators who can benefit from that program. Our next board meeting will be on February 12th, and we're aiming to have it in the Framingham area, and we'll post information about where it'll be located shortly. And we'll see some of our colleagues in Framingham as well. So that concludes my updates. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now I can call up our guest from Framingham. That was so we're going to move to, we're going to.
I love the city. It's, I love the city, and that's why I volunteered to be the one to come.
Awesome. We are going to move to the public comment portion of the meeting, and I will call up Jane Cohen to join us at the front table here. We'd like to ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. I also want to acknowledge that the board has received public comment by email. It's been distributed prior to the meeting. Jane, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, you're very welcome. And so people can know that I do talk all about these wonderful things, all about early family education and home, all of it. But I did write my notes, and I have it timed to 3 minutes, so I just wanted to let you know. I want to first and foremost thank the board for your ongoing support of the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement programs. I am here today representing the grant-funded CFCs, as they're known, Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Programs, and the Parent-Child Plus program. I am Jane Cohen from the Early Childhood Alliance of Framingham at the Framingham Public Schools. I have been the coordinator for 15 years and in the field of social work, early education, family engagement, and support for over 40 years. Our site is fortunate to have the Framingham Public Schools as the lead agent dating back to the 90s as they prioritize early family education, early literacy, school readiness for all children and families so they start kindergarten on equal footing. Framingham is fortunate to have a culturally rich, diverse community. I will provide a brief overview as well as leaving a packet of information and family testimonies and stories on how the CFCEs provide important services in our local communities. Complex challenges met with promotive solutions. The CFCEs and the Parent-Child Plus programs continue to see early on family isolation, language barriers, limited knowledge on pathways to essential services such as healthcare, early intervention, special ed, literacy, housing, food, mental health services, etc. With the CFC funding, we are able to target high-need families with children 6 years and younger. Here are a few examples of the CFC and the Parent-Child Plus programs help all families with young children. Ways we support, educate, and partner. Play, Learn, and Grow Together groups offer an immersive, intentional learning experience using strength-based practices with rich, interactive learning activities. Families build trusting relationships, gain opportunities for socialization, school readiness, family and community engagement opportunities for both the parent and the child. The programs create peer-to-peer support and act as a navigator who guides you along the parenting journey. CFC programs greet all families with resources and referrals with a resource guide for early childhood. This booklet is a roadmap to the community to have a guide for the parenting journey. I've included it in your packet. The Ages and Stages screening tool offers a tool for parents to understand their child's development and let them know they are their child's first and most important teacher. Early literacy and school readiness skills are introduced and reinforced with the parent and child together. Leadership Council to gain an early childhood voice and focus on sharing common messages across different sectors, including strengthening partnership framework, strengthening families and the 5 protective factors, best practice principles, healthy outcomes for positive solutions. Efficient and effective use of resources through collaboration and coordination of services. The CFC lead agent and the physical locations at the Framingham Public Schools and the Framingham Public Library reinforce the importance of early literacy, education, and family engagement right from the start, in turn promising educational outcomes by investing early on in young children and families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for public comment? All right, we will now move to some routine business, which is the approval of the December 18th minutes. I'd like to make a note that we will amend the minutes to reflect that Jen James Price was not in attendance at the December meeting. That will be reflected in the final version. Are there any additional additions, corrections, or edits to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Maria. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Recognizing Nikki and Jen James Price. Thank you. The minutes of the December 18th, 2024 as amended are approved. Now we'll move to our first agenda item, which is childcare financial assistance reimbursement rate.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to invite Ashley White and Amy Checkaway to join us. As the board will recall, at the December board meeting, we had a fairly extensive presentation regarding, and also Crystal Linton, EEC's budget director, excellent. Paul Ward unable to join us today, but I know Crystal has also been along with a whole set of other folks at the agency who've worked on the proposal. So you'll recall, you should give this to.
I could have drove.
Thank you. That at the December board meeting, we had a fairly extensive presentation regarding the FY25 rate increase and also looking back. We have $22.5 million this year, and the team will have an opportunity to sort of summarize what we reviewed in December about the agency's directionality. We have had significant rate increases over the last 2 years and have also had the opportunity to be approved for alternative methodology, allowing us to base rates and inform our recommendations and changes in rates around the cost of care rather than the price, which has been a significant opportunity for reform within the system and has allowed us to begin to address longstanding inequities in geographies, in age groups, and in settings. We made, with this board's support last year, we were able to make significant progress. And this year, our proposals reflect the agency's interest in continuing that progress. And so we look forward to sharing this information with you and hope for board action on it as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Happy New Year to all. So we are back here today, as the Commissioner noted, to briefly first review some background information related to the Childcare Financial Assistance FY25 rate increase and discuss the guiding principles and proposed changes to the reimbursement rates for early education and care and after school and out of school time care providers that accept CCFA for potential board approval. As you're all aware, the information that we presented in December was quite detailed, and since we spent a lot of time on the update to the cost models and talking about the cost research from this year at both the November and December board meetings, we aren't planning to focus on that as much today, but really encourage anyone interested who is also watching or listening to this meeting today to check out those meetings and materials. The December presentation covered both the development of the rate increase proposals that we're talking about today, as well as a quick recap of the November presentation that was given by our research partner, AIR, who is conducting the cost research, including updates to agency cost models in partnership with EEC this year. So starting as always with the what. Today, as I already said, we are focused on proposed changes to the reimbursement rates for early education care providers who accept state child care financial assistance, known as rates. As the board is well aware, our CCFA reimbursement rates help the state to, that the state pays help to defray or reduce the cost of childcare for eligible families, and EEC's rates for programs participating in the CCFA system really impact program revenue, financial stability, and the extent to which they are able to invest in staff and quality improvement. And as a reminder, EEC's current rate structure includes different daily rates for CCFA based on program type, based on child age, and geographic region. So funding has been appropriated for increases to CCFA rates over many years. And here you can just see for the past 6 years, including the current one, increases in the state budget for child care financial assistance rates, including whether line item language focused on different program types. In fiscal year 24, last year, the EEC board used findings from the cost research to approve significant changes to both child care financial assistance rates and the rate structure. And as I just said, these were informed for the first time formally by the cost of care, in addition to information that was considered about market rates. As you're aware, this included a notable across-the-board increase consolidation of rates from 6 to 3 to address longstanding geographic inequities and targeted increases to increase rates in particular that were furthest away from the cost of care. Last year's resources allowed us to increase center-based rates to about 81% of the cost of care and move the lowest rates from 56% to 72% of the cost of care, and that was based on 2022 data. As I mentioned last month, we continue to be engaged in research to better understand and continue to track the effects of these rate increases. And I briefly was able to share some qualitative findings from our research partners with the board last month that really included both positive feedback about the recent increases in rates from programs participating in the Child Care Financial Assistance System, as well as input from both participating and non-participating programs that it would be beneficial for some rates to get even closer to private pay tuition prices. As I also mentioned, the researchers are in the midst of a more quantitative analysis, but EEC data does show that the percent of programs participating in Child Care Financial Assistance is continuing to increase. And we are up to almost 68% participation of programs right now, compared to about 63% in March. We recognize rates are just one of the contributing factors, but this is a notable data point and metric to continue to focus on. As the Commissioner mentioned, we are on track on our federally approved plan to refine and use a cost-based methodology to inform adjustments to our child care financial assistance rates. And just as a reminder, a final report, including an executive summary summarizing the cost research and the implementation of this cost-based methodology that is being used to inform rates will be hopefully available this spring. We will continue to work with AIR to engage in further refinements to the cost models, including the assumptions over the next 5 months, and there will be opportunities for further input from really anyone, but also we'll have formal engagements as part of the next phase of work. In addition to the timeline we committed to federally, the updates to the cost models that AIR has made feel very important, and as we've been talking about, we learned quite specifically that over the last 2 years, costs for programs, as well as for all of us, have increased quite a bit. The estimated per child cost increased between 12 and 26%, depending on the age group, program type, and region. We also learned that while costs did vary and continue to vary across regions, it did not at this juncture support making any major changes to the child care financial assistance rate structure that was adjusted more significantly last year. So now I think we will turn to talking specifically about the proposed options, and I will turn it to Ashley.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. So before I get into the details of this slide, I just wanted to remind folks of the sort of guiding principles behind our proposal. I think as Amy indicated, we wanted to use the alternative methodology that we have to set financial assistance rates. So taking everything we've learned about the cost of care to date to inform these adjustments, and again, wanted to make a particular focus on the rates that are farthest from the cost of care. Secondly, we want to recognize that costs have gone up for everyone, and so part of our proposal includes an adjustment increase for all programs to recognize those increasing costs. We also want to be mindful of how we're distributing resources, and so we are doing so in a manner that sort of aligns proportionally to where CCFA children are receiving care, both by program type and by region. And then we also take into consideration that there are some really important differences between the assumptions within our center-based cost models and the assumptions in our FCC models, particularly the salaries and compensation that we're using. So the FCC model is sort of more of a hybrid based on current costs and a salary that is likely aspirational. So it ties the salaries to a center-based director salary. And then the center-based model is based on sort of the current cost related to wages, current salaries. So those are the sort of underpinning principles behind this proposal. And so going into this slide now, in December, we came to you all and we put forth two options for a targeted rate increase, both of which are taking into consideration that cost of care and some of the principles that I mentioned just now, along with ensuring that we're in compliance with line item language in the FY25 budget. So this slide is I think familiar to folks. You probably saw it in December with the sort of added addition here that our recommendation is to go with option one because it does dedicate a bit more resources to those targeted areas that are farthest from the cost of care. So again, as you heard in December, the biggest difference between these two options is the degree to which resources are going towards those rates farthest from the cost of care versus going towards all rates. And again, option one provides further resources to rates farthest from the cost of care. And you can see those differences in terms of what percent across the board is dedicated to each program type and option. And then one other thing I just wanted to mention, the reason why the across the boards are slightly different for centers versus FCCs is because there was language in a supplemental, the closeout supplemental budget that dedicated an additional $2.5 million, but it was specifically for rates for center-based programs. So that's the reason why there's a difference there. And then in addition to these targeted adjustments, you'll see at the bottom here, we also are recommending a retroactive increase of 50 cents per day for the add-on rate for the period between July 2024 and September 2024. So hopefully that covers it. Don't want to go into many details now since you've already heard it, but happy to take any questions or comments from you all, and thank you very much.
Questions or comments?
Quick number question, 22 point, so the budget was 22.5, right? Mm-hmm. And the estimated cost is 22.2, so is there?
Yeah, these are estimations, okay. Based on costs and the application of the rates.
Okay.
We also have to leave some room for the retroactive.
That's fine, just wanted to.
Additional questions or comments from the board?
Thank you for all the work.
Yeah, I just want to echo the thanks. I mean, this has been a body of work for a number of years, and it continues, and you can see this. And I just appreciate the time in December to give us all time to kind of, sit on this and kind of learn from it, because it is complex and it is a lot of change. And giving time for the field to express any kind of questions or concerns that they may have. And so I appreciate the process too. It feels a little more deliberative than it has even years ago. And so just grateful for that as well. Commissioner, before we move to a vote, do you have any other? You good?
No, I just want to express my thanks to the team too, and also to the legislature and the governor for supporting these rate increases. We wouldn't have been able to make the kind of progress we have and begin to really address and move down this kind of path towards cost-informed rates without the significant resources that have provided to the agency. So, and an amazing amount of work by the team. So,
appreciative that the option that you recommend is the guiding principle of what we've been talking about for so long, which is moving towards the true cost of care as best we can. And so I'm grateful for that. Any other questions or comments from the board before we move to, okay. I'd like to move the motion to comply with the FY25 line item and FY24 supplemental closeout language, federal rate reimbursement and family access requirements, and provide much needed support and financial stability to early education and care providers across the board. That the Board of Early Education and Care hereby approves the department's recommendation, option one as presented, regarding the FY25 rate increase for providers of subsidized early education and care. Can I have a second?
Second.
Second, Dr. Sager. And I'm going to call the roll on this. Jamela Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Kim Lucas,
Yes.
Georgia Tanasoff,
Yes.
Jen James Price,
Yes.
Carolyn Kane,
Yes.
Maria Moeller,
Yes.
Nikki Ruiz,
Yes.
Dr. Linda Sager,
Yes.
Secretary Tutwiler.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well, and the motion passes. I want to extend, again, my thanks to the entire team for this, but also amplify the thanks to the governor and the legislature for allowing us the resources to even be able to have this conversation. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Amy, can you just advance the slide one while we get the new team up, the new team for a vote up here? Thank you, rates team, and while we invite Ellen Grandine and Erica Morin and Jocelyn Bound to come up, I'll give the board a little bit of context. We are moving through the opportunity to expend the funds that were provided us in the FY25 budget. So I thank you for your action on the rate proposal. In the final FY25 budget, we also were provided with $15 million new dollars for early education workforce. So at the October board meeting, we sought the board's action and support around $7.5 million in early education scholarships for funding that was provided in the FY25 budget. With those funds, we asked for the board's support in expanding and supporting existing scholarship programs so that we could use existing infrastructure and move those dollars out as quickly as possible to support the needs in the field. And with your support, we worked closely with the Department and Board of Higher Education and our community colleges and Urban College to make sure those funds will be able to be moved forward and expended in this fiscal year. The budget also included $7.5 million in new funding for a loan forgiveness program, which was the language that was included in the final budget. And we, in similar fashion, have sought to find partners who are experts in this work. So we were not in the position of standing up a brand new program, but working closely with those who already know how to do loan forgiveness, or as the board and Department of Higher Education call it, loan repayment. So we are very pleased to be here today to seek the board's support for further our partnership with the Department and Board of Higher Education around a loan repayment program for staff working in EEC licensed and funded programs. So I'm pleased and grateful to the team for the work that they've done to work closely with our partners in higher ed to move this work forward. Jocelyn?
So I won't read the slide, but this summarizes the budget language and the expectation of the budget language that has created this line and provided us with the $7.5 million. But it is designed to be a program that gives preference to educators who have shown a commitment to working in the field, with additional attention to those serving families with higher needs or working in regions with limited supply. So we have worked, the team has worked very hard to create a program and coordinated with the team at the Department of Higher Education to think about how to implement this. And I'm going to turn it over to Ellen Grandine to provide a summary of what's been done.
Great. So as Jocelyn mentioned, we've been working in partnership with our team at the Department of Higher Ed, and we were challenged with coming up with the criteria and guidelines for your consideration today. And so what we were able to do with their expertise and in working in partnership, as I said, is to create both eligibility requirements for educators, and then we could provide some of the program details. And so, as you can see in the slides, there's just this is a summary of the criteria around looking at educators that are working currently in the field and have committed a minimum of 5 years or more to the field at this time. And we did align a lot of this eligibility with what's also in our criteria for early educator scholarship, to include staff working in early childhood education programs, including residential programs. And then, as I said, priority for those that have served for a minimum of 5 years and then are also, U.S. citizens and meet that criteria. And then committed to working for a minimum of 1 year in an EEC license or funded program following the award annually. And then the way the program will roll out is that awards will be provided up to $7,500 per year. And the payment actually goes right to the loan and not to the educator directly. The program will be administered by the Department of Higher Education, and educators are required to provide a proof of active full-time working status in an EC license program. And educators, until the funding is completely spent, can apply annually. And so we have a timeline for the next steps. Thanks, Jocelyn. After the motion today, this will go for consideration to the Department of Higher Ed. what we really want to do is be put on their agenda for their next meeting. And at that time, they'll also estimate costs for the rollout and administration. And after the board vote, we'll be working in partnership, an ongoing project to develop an application. And then we'll be working on a communication plan once that application is opened. And then we'll start to disseminate funds. And these will be retroactive to July 1, 2024.
And so the budget language does require that this is done in partnership between the Board of the Department of Higher Education and the Board of the Department of Early Education and Care. So we have a motion for your consideration.
And this is very similar to the one we did previously in the fall. And it's basically requesting that you allow us to bring this to DHE and submit the proposal that we've submitted to you for their approval to administer this program.
Any questions or comments from the board? I love seeing the partnership with cross secretariat where we are kind of leveraging each other's expertise. And I just, not that this team is an amazing idea of standing up a whole new program to do this when there's expertise within the secretariat that can help bring this to market probably a little faster, quicker, and meet the needs of the educators who need this program, I just think is awesome. And so thank you for the hard work to kind of bridge that communication and that the work that's needed to execute on this. I just think it's great. I do have one question. So on the eligibility, I see priority for those who have served for a minimum of 5 years. So, you know, there's probably some process there, but those who have served 1, 2, 3, 4 years can apply, just knowing that the priority is given to those
Correct.
that have a longer tenure in the sector.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Any other questions or comments from the board?
And I just want to mention that it's also, it's public and private institutions within the state of Massachusetts.
Okay. And I know Dr. Lucas has a question as well.
Yes, thank you. And I just have a clarifying question. What degrees would be considered under this? Would this be associate, bachelor's, master's, PhD, any and all, or?
Yep. Yes, any degree that leads to a certification or licensure for the Department of Early Education and Care.
So not just undergraduate.
It's undergraduate as priority, that's written into the eligibility. So it's an approved undergraduate degree program that leads to licensure or other form of certification. So it could be an associate's degree.
But not
bachelor's degree,
not
a
master's and
master's,
PhD
or-
yet. That's certainly something that could be considered should there be an opportunity for future rounds.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about retention, and so I would be curious to track this just to see what type of engagement from the field with this program, just to challenge that
absolutely.
hypothesis, right, of like what's needed for people to advance their education as well, and because that's equally as important. So, good question. All right. I move that the Board of Early Education and Care, subject to revision by the Commissioner, approves the department's proposal to submit to the Board of Higher Education for its approval that the Department of Higher Education administer the Early Childhood Educator Student Loan Repayment Program in accordance with General Law, Chapter 15A, Section 19G. Can I have a second?
Second.
Maria, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Any abstentions? Great. Thank you for this. This is good work.
Thank you.
Great work. Thank you so much. And you can see it was program and legal that had to all come into agreement. So
And-
we are grateful for the partnership with our colleagues.
Yes, thank you. With that, I think we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reassemble and then hit the second half of our program.
Okay, go, John.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you. As we transition to the next section of our agenda, we're going to focus on mental and behavioral health, a recurring critical theme in our work that we hear regularly. Supporting the well-being of our students, families, and providers is not just a programmatic priority, it's a foundational element of effective early education and care. I want to welcome members of our team today and our guests who will guide us through an overview of current initiatives, partnerships, and resources aimed at addressing these needs. From the early childhood mental health consultation program to the STREET initiative and new tools being developed for trauma-responsive care, these efforts reflect our commitment to building a system that prioritizes social-emotional learning, resilience, and equity. Welcome. Commissioner, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are really pleased for the opportunity to share some of the work happening here at EEC and also across the state around early childhood mental health and behavioral health. As many of you have heard me talk about, and I'm sure you hear in your own worlds and interactions with programs and schools, that the issue of behavioral health and mental health in our programs is as pressing as it has ever been. There isn't one program visit that I go to where I don't hear about the behavioral health challenges that leaders in programs and teachers in programs are experiencing with the children who are enrolled there, and its impact on turnover among teachers and morale, and the need for additional supports around positive behavioral health and working with the whole family. At last month's meeting, we were able to see at Community Teamwork Inc., their new behavioral health center, really reflecting, I think, the need across the state to create greater resources and respond. So I'm thrilled today to be able to turn it over to our behavioral health team, which we've been working to build at the agency. We've had some longstanding resources, and we've been adding those to and expanding those and thinking about how to build those statewide, including some experts now at the agency who we're going to be really excited to introduce you to. And we are only scratching the surface. And this is certainly an area where we know that the department alone is not going to be able to meet the needs of our educators, of our children and families across the state. So I'm also really excited that we will start the presentation with some work that the Secretary and the Governor have prioritized around creating really a statewide framework, early childhood through higher education. So, and what we really need is a statewide strategy and approach. And so looking forward to turning it over to you, Secretary. And then the last part of our presentation, we will invite our guest from the Office of the Child Advocate to join us. So continuing on the theme of getting help from those who have expertise in other parts of state government or the community to support our work and bring additional resources into the field. We are going to be really excited to share with you a new partnership and collaboration with the Office of the Child Advocate to bring training both to EEC staff and members of the field. So with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Jocelyn Bown and Sarah Volkanot and Amy Smith-Zioli, who will lead us through a presentation on EEC's efforts. Oh, first I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Hutweiler first to talk about the statewide framework, and then he will turn it over to the EEC team.
Indeed, I will, and happy to do that. Should name up front, I am not an expert on mental and behavioral health. I am an individual that cares a lot about it and understands its importance. And I feel very privileged to work in an administration that, when thinking about the work related to education, really centers what we call the hierarchy of need. And by that I mean, if we have an expectation that children in early education and care, and children and young adults in the K-12 space, and young adults in the higher ed space, if we have an expectation that they're going to learn and grow and develop, then we need to make sure that we're tending to their hierarchy of need, and that is inclusive of food security, housing stability, access to resources to meet their physical health needs, and of course, tending to their mental and behavioral health needs. And that means not just responding when there's a problem, but also thinking proactively about social emotional learning and building resilience. And so, as the commissioner highlighted or noted, there's not a person in this room who doesn't share the deep concern or is not aware of the deep concern around children and their mental and behavioral health needs. We heard that at every single one of the 14 listening sessions. But thrilled that there's efforts designed to address these challenges. We're going to hear from the EEC team and from the Office of the Child Advocate. Certainly, as you mentioned, Commissioner, there are really robust efforts happening among the providers. One that resonates pretty deeply with me was the Square One visit 2 years ago, where they're thinking deeply about how to meet students' needs on this challenge. And so what I want to lift up just briefly with my time is a strategy driven by the Healy Driscoll administration to enhance those efforts. And the enhancement comes in the form of what I would call systemness, right? Thinking about ways to create better, stronger, more enhanced linkages between all of these efforts that are happening, not just in the early education and care sector, but also in K-12 and in higher ed. We feel very grateful that a $5 million budget allocation in the governor's budget made it all the way to the finish line, every single penny of that recommendation to create a framework for mental health from birth through higher education. And this is designed to do a couple of key things. One, develop a real shared language around what the challenge actually is. If you talk to 10 different people about the mental health crisis, as some people call it, or the behavioral mental health challenge amongst our young people, you're probably going to get 7 different answers. You might get 10 different answers, but as state partners, how do we see this issue? How are we defining it? What's the shared language around it? Identifying best practices, right? We know that people are engaging in different strategies to address the needs. Well, we really want to get rooted in what has been identified as best practices and go deep with them, but also seed innovative and new practices as well. And then be really intentional about the sector linkages. And by that I mean from early education and care to K-12 and from K-12 to our public higher ed institutions. What are the relationships? What are the handoffs? What are the understandings between those sectors as it relates to this challenge? And then finally, how do we know what we're doing is working, right? What are the metrics we're looking at? What are the data systems that we're referring to say, hey, all of these efforts are happening to address the mental and behavioral health challenges. There's all this funding going into this. How do we know that it's working? And so the framework is designed to sort of address all of those needs. And we are in the very early beginnings of this. I'll say this is yet again another interagency or partnered effort between EEC, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, Department of Higher Ed, Department of Mental Health, Department of Public Health, all leaning into this together. They've been meeting to begin the early conversations around what this framework will look like. We put out an RFP to bring on a partner to help shepherd us through this work, and that process is being brought to a close. Next week, we'll begin to identify that partner, and so we're really excited about what we think this will do to sort of enhance the work that's happening. I intend to sort of give ongoing updates on this work to the board to let you know what's happening, as well as Faith Ambrose on my team and Tom Moreau, lost his last name, and I'm probably not watching, so that's good for me, as they are running point for my office. But we're really excited about what we think this can do to address this really critical challenge.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm now happy to turn it over to the EC team to share some of our work.
Thank you. And my role in this is relatively brief. I remember when I started in this position, we had the longstanding early childhood mental health grants, but it was very clear, given the pervasiveness and the size scope of the need, that we needed to do more, and we needed the expertise in-house to start thinking about how to build around that resource. And so I'm just thrilled to be able to turn this presentation over to Sari Volkanot and Amy Smithsoli, and we will meet her team as well as the team from OCA that's working with us on this as well.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you this afternoon. I'm Sarah Volkanot. I'm the Associate Commissioner for Program innovation and support. And I have the honor of working alongside a very dedicated and growing team of EEC staff who are very deeply committed to understanding the needs of the field and responding to them through a suite of supports. And I think today, just really excited to be able to share the enthusiasm around the work to support mental and behavioral health. And share a bit about kind of the landscape of what exists and where we're headed. And I think as you're listening today, like what I would like you to pay attention to, and I hope that what you hear in kind of Amy's presentation is just our deep commitment to working alongside educators and leaders throughout the workforce. And we see our role really being providing resources, tools, and strategies to support them in building their own practice and sustaining it. And so I think you'll see that reflected in certainly a lot of the work that we're doing now and the type of work that we're hoping to do moving forward. And so, Commissioner, to your point, like it's a starting place, we're scratching the surface, but we really are, I think, we have very high impact kind of services available now and lots of opportunities to grow. So you'll hear about things that exist, you'll hear about the new developments in the work. And again, I think partnership is a theme that continues to come up, including our partnership with the Office of the Child Advocate. But also this is work that is deeply integrated and will continue to be integrated into the work of the department. And so, Amy has been a very fearless leader in this effort. And I think, the work to integrate across state systems certainly comes into play, but we have a lot of work to do internally too to make sure that we're bringing this in all the places that we can. So really happy to be here to elevate this work, and just great appreciation to Amy and her entire team for really their commitment to all of us. So happy to turn it over to Amy to introduce herself.
Yep. Thank you, and thank you so much for having us today so we can share the work that we've been doing for the last year and a half or so. It did started out, I started out alone in this position. And so to look back just a very short year and a half ago to now have a team working on this, just so appreciative of the commitment that our administration has to recognizing that importance of behavior and social health. And so if we just take a minute to ground ourselves in that work, when we think about the impact of behavioral and social emotional learning that it has on our young children, when we're able to get this right at this very young age, it can have profound impacts, profound positive impacts on the way in which our children are developing and how they are moving through their educational journey, right? We know that when we get this right, they are able to better self-regulate. They have better self-awareness. They can recognize, when we're talking about very young children, we're talking about being able to recognize those emotions that they're having, both big and small. And having the ability to be able to self-regulate makes a huge impact in the way that they are in classrooms, and the way that they are in family childcare, the way that they are showing up in the world, right? We know that it enhances their social skills. And when we talk about social skills for young children, we're talking about the ability to be able to be engaged, that really active engagement, and having those serve and return conversations with both peers and adults, right? That curiosity and wonder that we think of with young children, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about enhanced social skills and improved academic performances in very young children. And probably the most important is when we talk about relationships. We know that very young children thrive and grow and develop in the context of relationships. And so those positive long-term outcomes and relationships really set the foundation for all that other learning that's to come. So that's why it's so important for us to really focus on the impacts and the importance of behavioral health and social emotional learning in all of our programs.
This is for the live stream, so these guys can hear you, but we want to make sure everyone who's watching can hear, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So when we think about our team being responsive to the field and what's happening, as you said, Commissioner, and you, Secretary, you heard over and over again about behaviors that challenge, right? First and foremost, that's what we hear. And whenever we are in a different setting, no matter what program it is, family child care, group and school age, before and after school care, we're hearing about behaviors that challenge. And these are some of the ways that those behaviors that challenge are showing up in an early childhood space. Unfortunately, aggression. We're seeing a lot of aggression. And so when we talk about aggression for young children, we're talking about big behaviors,
big responsive behaviors that are often safety concerns for themselves, for their peers, for the teachers that are in the space with them. Those social skills, again, we're talking about a lack of social skills. And so kids really having a very difficult time entering play, figuring out how to be interactive with their peers and one another. We hear a lot about anxiety in our older kids, but unfortunately, it starts in our very young children too, where we're seeing that show up in both physical symptoms and then those social systems. So, kids that are perhaps saying stomach aches, headaches, not wanting to be at school for whatever reason. That anxiety is really showing up earlier and earlier, and of course, that affects their behavioral and mental health. We are seeing more and more trauma responses in young children. So those adverse events that are happening with young children and families, those are showing up as behaviors that challenge in the classroom. At the center of all these behaviors, we have our early childhood workforce, right? Who are trying desperately to be able to support children in the way that they need to be supported, but it's hard work, right? And those early educators often are feeling burnt out, and they're not tending to their own mental health needs. And so we have to start with those early educators that are doing the very best that they can to manage all of those behaviors and to be able to provide those supports. And so we need to be very mindful of how we're supporting educators first and foremost. So when we think about all those things that are showing up in the field for our groups, for our mental health, our behavioral health team, these are some of the goals that feel like it makes the most sense to us as we push our work forward. As Sarah had said, we really want to be able to help educators build a foundation of strategies where they can be effective research-based strategies around those best practices that you were talking about, Secretary, to be able to create environments where there's social emotional learning opportunities throughout the day and throughout their care to be able to prevent those behaviors that challenge and to prevent dysregulation. And we know that when we're able to do that, we're able to reduce the use of exclusionary discipline that's happening, certainly not just our state, but across the nation, really, with our young children. And when I talk about exclusionary discipline, I'm talking about when kids and families are asked to leave programs because there's a feeling that we just don't have what we need in this space to be able to support the kind of behaviors that we're seeing. Exclusionary discipline can also mean when we're maybe taking a child and removing them from their usual setting time and time again, right? And so circle time might be really hard for a particular child, and all of a sudden we're finding ourselves removing them every day from that particular setting. And so we're not giving them the chance to be able to figure out how to be in that space. Right? And so we want to be able to provide educators with what they need so that they feel empowered to be able to keep kids in the classroom altogether or in a family child care setting or in before and after school care, right? We want to be able to provide support and training opportunities around trauma-informed and responsive care, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So that certainly has been uplifted as one of our goals. And again, to support educator wellness, because we know that it has to start there. A dysregulated teacher, caregiver, cannot help a dysregulated child. Right? So these are some of the supports that we have in place right now. We have our EEC behavioral health team, which I will introduce just shortly. We have our early childhood mental health grant, which Jocelyn referred to earlier, which is agencies and consultants across the state that helps with consultative services to all of our licensed programs, family child care, group and school age, before and after school, and they are able to provide support within the context of mental and behavioral health supports, whether that's for an individual child, whether that's for a classroom or program-wide. We have our pyramid model supports. When I talk about social emotional learning, pyramid model is a framework that we often refer to, and is really something that we use both our behavioral health team and our mental health consultants often start with the strategies of social emotional learning that come from pyramid model. Our statewide professional development academy, which of course provides professional development, training, and/or coaching. And then we also have our Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative. And so many times we're in those community programs helping to support the special education support that's happening there. Oftentimes this is new for a community program to be able to have an inclusive classroom where they might have 2 or 3 or 4 kiddos in a classroom that have individual educational IEPs. And so we're here to be able to help them sort of walk through that process as well. And we're always working towards having better collaboration with our internal folks, right? Our quality team, our licensors who are in the programs, our CFCEs, which I often refer to as the 411 because they know everything that's happening in a lot of their regions. And so just working towards being able to have better collaboration and consistency of supports through there as well. Aside from our partnerships, obviously within EEC, is we have our partnerships and collaborative efforts with other state agencies. And so the Department of Mental Health, we sit on many work groups with the Department of Mental Health that focus on early childhood mental health and what supports that we're all working on together to be able to provide additional supports. We can do more together than we can separately, right? DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we work very closely with DESE when, as I talked about earlier, our pyramid model supports. We both have separate contracts to be able to provide those pyramid model supports to programs, and so we often come together on several different initiatives. One is to be able to support those CPPI classrooms I referred to, and we're working on another initiative now to be able to create a one-day summit, which will come in the spring and invite all early childhood educators to talk just about inclusion and behaviors that challenge and how we're working together to support educators around that. Our Department of Public Health, we are lucky enough to share a healthcare nurse consultant who is doing some wonderful discovery work and development work around healthcare, health and safety issues around our early childhood programming. And so really excited to hear about, some of those findings that she will come up with. And finally, I know they've been waiting, to be able to introduce our behavioral health team. We are a small but mighty team, but I'm going to look to you all to introduce yourselves, if you don't mind. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Chris Lloyd. I'm a behavioral health support specialist out of Region 6, and I support Region 6 and Region 3 together with Stacy.
Hi, I'm Stacy Ware. I am a behavioral health support specialist in the Southeast region, and I also support the Northeast.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexis Thibodeau. I support the Western region and the Central region, and I sit in Region 2. Nice to meet all of you.
And before you go on, Amy, I think just in recognition of this team came into a brand new role that required a lot of flexibility and innovation and really hitting the ground running. And we're just incredibly grateful for them coming in to this role and really showing leadership and just really working very immediately to address the needs of the field. So just share appreciation for what they're teaching us about what the needs are. So.
Yeah.
Just want to reiterate that, and a lot of the work we're able to do and the additional capacity is actually supported through our preschool development grant, which our PDG grant, and when we were fortunate enough to apply for and get those resources, it was really about building the system that was needed. And I think at next month's meeting we're going to have an opportunity to share sort of more generally about what we've been able to do with that. But I want to recognize sort of Jocelyn and Sarah's leadership in knowing we needed to build this team and figuring out how to get that done, and then wow, are we lucky to have Amy Smith-Zioli in this role? And I think that was pretty obvious already. And through the rest of the presentation, we'll see that too. And then her support and hiring and recruiting of talent to support the field, who I know you all had to get hit the ground running because the needs were great and the lines long for assistance. So just appreciating the leadership that we have here.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Commissioner. And just to give everybody a sense of sort of what is the behavioral health team has been spending their time doing. So the biggest thing is really providing direct support to programs. So going into programs, meeting with directors, meeting with educators who are often overwhelmed, and having those hard conversations about, tell us what you need, tell us what would make a difference here, being able to help them walk through some positive behavioral intervention strategies, de-escalation strategies, and what should they do when a child throws a chair across the room. These are all very real things that are happening in programs. And so oftentimes what we're finding as well is just us being there and walking into the program and having those conversations with folks acts as a bit of a reflective practice for them. And so you can almost feel their shoulders go down a little bit as they know somebody's listening and somebody at EEC is listening and hearing what we're saying, and they are feeling like somebody's on their team now to be able to get them the support that they need. And so oftentimes the support that we provide them with could just be exactly what they need. Sometimes we help them to create referrals to our early childhood mental health consultation grant as well. And so helping them figure out what are the best things, what is the next best thing we can do here to support you, and really helping them walk through those processes to get them what they need. And of course, we have our early childhood mental health consultation grant. As Jocelyn mentioned, we've had this grant a very long time, and we are so lucky to have fantastic grantees across the state. And they often go in and start with an observation. They might follow that up with an assessment if it is an individual referral for a child. They really help to support the program think about professional development for their educators. They are really working with directors and with educators around implementing all of those best practices that we just talked about, right? What would be the next best thing to have in this classroom? How can we help you follow through with fidelity some of these strategies that we're talking about? And we're very lucky, during our last procurement period, we were able to also add to our grantee teams a family advocate, family support specialist, as well as a behavioral support specialist. So they're coming in with the consultants to really be able to help teachers put those strategies into practice, right? It's one thing to be able to hear what the strategy is, but in that moment of crisis, in that moment when a child is throwing a chair across the room, it's really nice to be able to have somebody there to say, let's do this together, or let me show you what I mean when I say, let's have more of a routine in this classroom. And so being able to have those supports embedded in the consultation work, I think, has been really, really helpful for our programs.
And Amy, if you don't mind, I just wanted to remind the board that this program was funded for a very long time at the agency at about $3.5 million. That might even preceded this whole team. And under this administration was expanded to $5 million in last fiscal year and maintained in this fiscal year, which allowed us through the procurement to do additional things, sort of restructure to make sure we were covering parts of the state, and really, I think through that procurement build a foundation to grow on to the extent. And so this board has supported in those years additional funding and expansion, and in your board recommendations this year also supported a recommendation of expanding, doubling this program. So I know it's been a priority, and to see the growth, at least modest growth, but I think like with many things, building the foundation for additional growth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to give a shout out to our grantees, these are the grantees that help us support the state. We have our Behavioral Health Network and the Collaborative for Education. They are covering, they help to support Western Mass and the Berkshires. We have Empower, which really helps several of our regional areas. They support Central Region, Northeast, as well as some areas in Metro Boston. Community Health Link, Together for Kids, they are supporting our Worcester and Central area. Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, they are covering North Shore and North Shore area. And Justice Resource Institute, they cover South Boston, Cape and the Islands, and Walker is our Boston grantee. And I really cannot say enough about our grantees and their willingness to support not only our initiatives, our other initiatives that we have here at EEC, but to support each other and be really flexible and innovative in what they see in their own communities, in their own regions. Very often BHN is seeing very different things in Western Mass and in the Berkshires than what might be happening in Metro Boston. We're still seeing those behaviors that challenge, but there's often different things that sort of rise up that are unique to those particular regions. And so really responsive to what's happening within their own communities. And so we are in a new year, a brand new year. And so these are some of the new initiatives that we're looking at for 2025. One of the things that is happening right now is the creation of our Inclusion and Support Toolkit. And this really has come out of our need and our hope to be able to develop supports for programs to reduce the use of exclusionary discipline. And as I just stated, we know that to be able to do that, we need to show up in support of our teachers, and we need to support in a way where we're not expecting teachers necessarily to sit down and read a 40-page document. Right? Not practical. And so what can we create for them that feels meaningful and useful in very busy, controlled, chaotic classrooms? And so we are hoping, we've developed a toolkit thus far, but we're really looking for a vendor to help us take it over the finish line, as well as create a supplemental resource guide and implementation guide, both for our programs in the field, and by that I mean our group and school age, family childcare, and after school. They will all have their own toolkit and resource guide, because there are different aspects, obviously, to each one of those programs, but also to create a guide for our behavioral health team. What is the best way for us to show up in programs and be helpful? So we're all really looking forward to that. And of course, that is coming with training for our educators and leaders and support partners. So that is the Inclusion and Support Toolkit. And then we turn to our trauma-informed and responsive training opportunities, which we are lovingly referring that to, we are calling that STREET, because we have to have an acronym. Strategic Trauma Responsive Early Education Training. I'm glad you like that, Secretary. I see. To implement, and this is really a training series for both educators and leaders. And we could not have done this without the partnership with the Office for Child Advocate and Center on Child Wellbeing and Trauma.
So why don't we invite our guests to join us? And so Maria Mercedes, who's the child advocate or the director of the Office of the Child Advocate, and probably needs little introduction here. And I'm not going to read a formal bio, but a couple things you need to know about Maria. One is that she, I don't know if it was the first, but she previously in two previous versions of the agency was the commissioner of the Office for Children. So has a longstanding commitment and knowledge of the department and our work, and someone who I've had the great fortune to work with over many years in many state agencies, and shows up for children and families in an absolutely deep and meaningful way, and also practical and logical, and has been a great source of support and guide in this role. So, and Audrey Smolkin, who also has had many roles in state and federal government, and so excited that the Center for Child Wellbeing and Trauma has moved now from UMass Medical over to the Office of the Child Advocate, where we are even closer to the opportunity. So under your leadership, and when Audrey's office came over to the Office of the Child Advocate, we were one of the
early folks that met with your team and talked about how we might partner together around trauma-informed and responsive training. And then the teams went off and like developed this brand new initiative. And we are so fortunate for this partnership and for your leadership. So thank you for being here today and for your collaboration with us. I'm looking forward to sharing with the board kind of the work we've been doing together.
Thank you for inviting us and for those very kind words. I want to just spend a few minutes before Audrey really goes into the deep dive of the street program. We've run out of, and all the agencies that we're partnering with, I can't keep all of these special names straight. So I'm glad that you all corrected me. Give you a sense about how we got here, and you will be pleased to know that a lot of this work came out of a pilot that we did with some early education programs in Worcester. I will tell you that in 2018, the Office of the Child Advocate unexpectedly was asked to convene and host a the Childhood Trauma Task Force. I'm sorry, I'll get this right. And that really there was an understanding or a concern on the part of the legislature that many of the children and their families that we provide services to were in fact the victims of extreme trauma. And that in order to help them achieve the thriving that we as the Office of the Child Advocate want to ensure that every child has the opportunity to thrive into adulthood, that it was clear that that needed to be addressed. And I think this was assigned to the Office of the Child Advocate because we reach across now 3 secretariats counting housing and livable communities. It used to be 2, now it's 3. And therefore, we would be able to convene, not that we were going to be doing the same thing, but that we wanted there to be a shared definitions that we used and really shared approaches so that a family, which oftentimes would receive services across the secretariats, we didn't want them hearing different things depending on which state agency they were working with. So the idea that we were going to be consistent at the state level was very important. There were recommendations coming from the Childhood Trauma Task Force really about how are we going to support the individual children and their families with trauma and building resiliency, which is really the goal, but also a recognition that the staff, both state staff and provider staff that were working with these families were experiencing secondary trauma. And we were convinced that some of that secondary trauma was the reason for high turnover rates in many of our programs. And so I think that we were very clear that we needed to do something that addressed that. And lo and behold, we had the opportunity to do a small pilot in early education centers that was really around both the training of the staff at the centers, but I think equally importantly, doing some of the work that you're already doing about going into the classroom and providing coaching and technical assistance to the line staff that were actually supporting that child, helping them to figure out the right intervention to help that child gain their own agency and help that healing process. And so even though that small pilot got interrupted by the pandemic, the preliminary results were so impressive that when we shared that with members of the legislature, and I will say this, I was equally surprised, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to take 3 years worth of the OCA advocating for money in order to actually launch this center. To my absolute surprise, money appeared 2 months later saying, go ahead in the middle of the pandemic and launch the center. So we launched the center in conjunction with the University of Massachusetts because that was the easiest way of getting it up and running. But then we realized that really what we wanted to do was to make sure that the center became a part of the OCA and part of the routine partnership work that we do with our sister agencies. And so 18 months ago, or thereabouts, the center became the 3rd division of the Office of the Child Advocate. And as the commissioner said, we began this task by asking Audrey and her team to meet with all of the commissioners. We met with all the secretaries. Tell us what you need. So as we plan our work is going to be totally supportive of your work. So we are very excited that we now have, we had a 15-month plan. We're going to have now a 3-year plan that we're working on to really map out how that work is going to occur so that we are able to provide support and the technical assistance and do that in conjunction with the existing resources that the agency has. So it is really exciting to be able to partner with EEC. Since my career was launched here 48 years ago, and really was the launch of my personal career came from this agency, from the predecessor agencies. So this agency, as Audrey knows, is near in. I have my favorites, and this is amongst my favorites. Has to be because this is really where I got my first chance at leadership. And so I'm going to let Audrey really provide the more important things in my giving you this historical context. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. It's a little intimidating to go after Maria, but I'm going to do the best I can. I'm a pretty casual presenter, so feel free to jump in with any questions or thoughts you have. I started my career as an early childhood educator, which is why we have to have acronyms for everything. So this was supposed to be join us on the street to strategic trauma responsive early education and training. The word I want you to hang on to there is strategic. Hang on to the trauma responsiveness too, but we really did try to hit at multiple levels. And what you're going to hear as I go through the slides is really the opportunity that EEC has given us and these amazing partners that we got to work with who all exist in 3D. I feel like we've been meeting for a year and a half on Zoom, and now it's very exciting. But really to meet at multiple levels. What do the providers need to know? What do the supervisors of the providers need to know? What does the academy need to know? What can we do to learn together so that every single level can benefit and really promote resilience? I think Maria said it very well, that our goal is not just being trauma responsive. That's important. That's where we start. I think of the pyramid that you addressed, Secretary, but we want kids to really thrive. We want them to be resilient. So what can we do to promote that resilience? That's sort of the undergrowth, the bottom line that we all really seek to get to. The other big theme you're going to hear about is racial equity. So I'm going to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about why we started all of this work. We did reach out to every commissioner, every secretary. They were all very helpful. Commissioner Kershaw came with a list. She is the one and only who said, this is so great that we're having this conversation. And here are the many, everybody else was, oh, it's so good to talk to you. And everyone always takes Maria's calls. So, everyone came to the table. But this commissioner said, okay, so ready? And just started going. So I will say we are very grateful for her leadership and her support and directed me to these brilliant people who we had so much fun designing every single level of this. The real goal is that there is a common framework, a common language throughout. We make it hard on families when they show up and they hear different words for very similar situations. And when the system that we've created says, okay, this is what it takes to be trauma responsive, but only if you're over here versus across the entire system. So we really are trying to take this systems approach. It starts with educating the providers. We are doing that in the way that we thought would be best for them. So it's an LMS-based system. They can take it whenever they have time. They can pause it as they go through it, and it really focuses on each of our guiding principles, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail. That is going to be released within the next couple weeks. We hope to create fanfare, spread the word that everyone gets to take these trainings, and we hope it provides them with a grounding, a language, a framework. It does not turn them into experts, and we don't need them to be experts. We need them to know what to do when Johnny picks up that chair that's been thrown around for the last part of the conversation. So that's our main goal with the LMS training. We are also training all the regional staff. That's actually next week. We feel very honored to be able to present to all of the field staff licensors, all of the R&P group. BRC team is coming. It's going to be very exciting. So that's next week, and Marie will help us kick that off as well. We're then going to offer a really deep dive training, primarily geared towards working with the PDCs. And I think I was lurking out here somewhere. So that's the main group that is going to spread the word throughout the field in a really deep dive way. And then they will offer
centers. So we
Thank
talked about
you.
the professional development academies. Yeah.
Thank you. And then we are also developing a contracted provider training because, as I said, she came with a list. So if you can go to the next, or I can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is the LMS I talked about. I'm not going to walk you through each of the guiding principles, although I welcome you at any of our many trainings. But I do want to hit one in particular. This is the framework you see. We train on these guiding principles as a way to respond to trauma and as a way to support the educators themselves. So it's multiple levels. As Amy said earlier, a dysregulated adult cannot support a child who is in crisis or having a trauma reaction. So we offer a guiding principle to help them, help themselves, and then be able to interact with children who have experienced that trauma. The lens is supposed to be how can we be trauma responsive with every child that we face. We also spend a fair amount of time talking about that fourth bullet: equity, anti-bias, and cultural affirmation. I'm going to pause there for a moment. Nationally, we know that Black boys are suspended or expelled from school at 3 to 4 times the rate of white girls. So there's gender and there's race and there's intersectionality, but what we know is happening is it's really derailing those families. It's not just about what you've now done to this child who is removed from what should have been a safe and helpful place. It's also what it can do to the family and their inability to then go out and work because they have no good, safe, quality childcare. So we spend a lot of time talking about a bias lens and what that means when we see certain reactions. Why are these children being removed at 3 to 4 times the rate? And what can we do to prevent that from happening? So we cover all the guiding principles, but we do have a particular lens in that area. Probably could even do this for you. So next week, we have this all-day training for all of the field staff, and we feel really lucky to be able to do this. Amy and I went on tour earlier, basically trying to sell this idea of come to the really fun training, and I will say she did such a good job that when we walked in, you could see this look of like, seriously, I have so much on my plate, and by the time we left, people were signing up. It was pretty amazing, which is to credit the field staff and also the team that we have here in central office. So one thing that I want you to pick up on this particular slide, we do the full day training and then we form communities of practice. What we've learned is one and done training where I show up and talk at people. I can be entertaining. I can have good slides. I bring cookies. It's not enough. You have to have that community of practice to come together and say, what did we learn? Here's a crisis I faced. How do we use that trauma responsive lens? What are the tools? So we have those follow-up community of practice. This is a deeper dive training that we mentioned. It's by application only, and the real goal there is to make sure we have people who will come in with some of the facilitation and training skills to be able to spread the word about being trauma responsive. One thing that came up early in our conversations was, what about the communities that speak in Spanish and we do all of the trainings in English? And yes, the providers do speak English and the PDCs do speak English, but wouldn't it be easier to talk about really hard topics like trauma responsiveness and racial equity in the language they are most comfortable speaking in? So where you're translating all of the materials so that that can happen. And I'm really grateful to the field staff who said, hey, wait a minute, don't you translate everything? And we said, of course we do, and immediately started to work on that. So we've been very lucky to get some good feedback. The next slide is on the regional training that these deeper dive educators who will have been trained by us will be able to do, and that will be in every single part of the state. We have representatives who are signing up, and the real goal is to build the capacity of the system so that they know how to do the work. We'll always come back, we will always partner, but we would like the people who do and take this deeper dive training to be available in their region on an ongoing basis. The idea behind it was to be really strategic in saying, we can come in and we can do the training for you, or we can train you on how to do the training for your field. And so that's been a really good opportunity that we've been able to provide so that they could then train all the providers in their area. So I'm gonna answer any questions anyone has, or I'm gonna turn it back over to Amy, who will talk a little bit about all of the upcoming opportunities we have and the timeline for it, which is also why you'll see us rush on out of here, because we're busy, we're on the move, and we're a little scared of the commissioner's list. Might be added on.
Sure. Any questions for our colleagues at OCA before I? All right. So this is really just a timeline in which all of those great trainings will be popping up for everybody. So from now until really June, these are some of the things that we can look forward to. As Audrey said, our first regional staff training day is next week. We have 2 full-day trainings this month, the 22nd and the 28th. Where we're welcoming licensors, investigators, any field staff that wants to participate in that day-long training. We are welcoming them to be able to participate. Those LMS modules, they should be going live this month. We're really looking forward to that. That Train the Trainer series they will launch the very first week in February, as well as what we're referring as our street kickoff week. And so there'll be multiple opportunities during that week for providers to be able to log on to lunch and learns and information centers, information sessions to figure out what is the best way for me to get involved with these trainings. Tell me more about the LMS. Tell me more about what is the most appropriate training for me to go to. And so really looking forward to being able to have that interface with the field and tell them about the trainings. And then as we move into spring, isn't that a nice thought, thinking about moving into spring after this cold day? That is when our first cohort of those champion trainers will be finishing up. And then they will be sort of tasked with then delivering those regional trainings and those deeper dives to educators who possibly took the LMS and said, this is great, I really would love to know more about this. How can this impact my work and the work that I'm doing with young children? And so those regional offerings will come sometime after April and then into the fall. So that is sort of the timeline that we're looking at for all these street opportunities. And then we will just leave you with some of our hopes and dreams and our ongoing efforts and aspirations as we think about moving the work forward. As the commissioner said at the very beginning, the need is so great that this really is all wonderful work that we're so excited and proud to bring before you all, but it really is just scratching the surface. And so as we think about moving the work forward and having other initiatives to be able to help support the field. One thing that comes to mind is that crisis management piece and perhaps a response team. We know that, a lot of our work is grounded in those preventative services and preventative care. But what happens when things get out of control? What happens when that anger sets in and that aggression sets into those classrooms, because we know that it is, right? And so when there's a real safety concern for the child and the peers and the teachers, who are they turning to? And we know that we certainly have crisis numbers and crisis folks that can come in. Many of our grantees actually have that falls under the umbrella of their agencies. But we really want to make sure that the folks showing up to those situations are highly trained in working with very young children, right? These are not teenagers. These are 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And so we want to there's a certain skill level that we want to make sure is there when people are showing up to those crisis situations. So we're not creating additional trauma for those kids and those teachers. So that's something that's on our mind. Of course, increased capacity for both my team, for our team, and the grantees. We would love to be able to have somebody in each one of our regions just to be able to increase that support as well as for the grantees and how they're showing up to helping programs. Targeted supports, as I talked about, for our early childhood educators. How can we help them identify and create opportunities for them to take part in reflective practice and supervision? Because we know that that is a piece that really does lend itself to helping with the emotional wellness of our teachers. And so what opportunities are we able to provide with them? Expanding our state agency partnerships. Of course, we see we have such wonderful partnerships. And so how do we build on some of these initiatives that we've already created? And then Secretary, you mentioned Square One. As we think about so many of our programs have created their own initiatives and created their own support systems around what can be creative and what works within their own culture and within their own walls. And so really doing more discovery work about what are other folks doing. You know, Square One is a perfect example of how they have uplifted their own mental health supports. And so how do we learn from that, and how do we support that in a way that continues to be helpful to more than just those programs. And so thank you all so much for entertaining and listening to our work. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions or
anything I can
comments
help
from the
with?
board? Discussion.
Well, this is very exciting. The trainings are amazing. I am not surprised what you've come up with. This will be very, very helpful to us. I am also want to comment on the EEC initiatives for a toolkit and the supplemental resource guide, because that will provide information for the teachable moment after they attend the training. So I think those initiatives and the other ones you're talking about will be extraordinarily helpful to us.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr.
And if I could just add one more thing, because I think this is very important for the Office of the Child Advocate. We have taken many efforts over the last several years in conjunction with the Department of Children and Families and many of our other partners to reduce inappropriate allegations of abuse and neglect. And so we see the reduction in turnover of staff, enabling staff to build relationships with families and build and get trust from families. And really, I think the Commonwealth is focused on making sure that families get the support that they need, the preventive support that's going to make a difference, so that we are not in a position, because we know there's disproportionality in those numbers as well. So we're damaging people who, you know, are already the victims of institutional racism and poverty. And so I think that I want to make sure that people understand that a lot of our efforts are also concerned that what we do in many of these areas is going to hopefully also reduce the number of inappropriate 51As and divert those to situations where the families can get the help that they deserve.
Maria?
I just want to thank you for prioritizing these services. You know, nothing, I mean, I oversee an organization with 1,200 children, 0 to 5, and nothing happens without these services. So I'm hoping this is just the beginning of more comprehensive services, and that we spend some time making sure that programs know that these supports exist. Programs are so busy dealing with these issues. I mean, I think the majority of the time of all our leaders in our centers is spent, you know, reaching out to families, you know, trying to develop those relationships and dealing with staff, trying to train them in terms of responding to these behaviors that we are seeing. I mean, Lawrence, and we are seeing daily behaviors like the ones you suggest, you know, mentioned. So thank you very much, and I'm so appreciative of prioritizing this, because again, nothing happens. This is the one thing that our children, especially in Lawrence, I'll speak to what I know in Lawrence. This is what's, you know, this has to happen in order for our children to accomplish or get to kindergarten at the same level as other children.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
I just want to say thank you. I think it's critical work that's been needed for a very long time, and that, you know, we want to address the needs of the whole child, and so their social and emotional development is critical to their success, you know, in other areas of their life. So I'm very happy to see it being addressed in such a comprehensive way, and I would just encourage the connections with our EHS agencies who do have expertise in dealing with these issues and resources, right? I mean, when it comes to very young children, we have the Department of Public Health and Early Intervention, and then for school-age children, we have the Department of Developmental Services as well as the Department of Mental Health, but we also have insurers that also are responsible for this type of care and work, including Mass Health. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Comments or questions? I just want to say thank you as well. And this makes me think back to, I think, the comment the secretary made in his opening remarks about kind of the core of our why, which is the children and families that we serve. And this is just foundational to success, right? And foundational to effective learning. And appreciate the administration, this board, the department, and their willingness to focus on this. We're brand new at this, right? And one of the things that the thread that I love is, reminds me of the task force, right? How do we bring in experts that do this every day to partner with us in order to keep the core of our why in the center? And so I love the language, Maria, that you were using, and I mentioned this at the last board meeting too. The children and families we serve don't step back and say, which secretariat am I talking to today? And so the idea of like just common language and the way that we talk about this is just so important, and it needs focus because we are busy and we have legacy terms and we each have different departments and protocols, but our ability to continue to lean in and challenge ourselves to find common language around this work is so critically important. And just want to recognize, I heard that from your comments a number of times, because to me it is constantly centering the children and families and the experience that they're having with multiple state agencies who operate and feel and look really different. And the more we can do to unify that is important. And so, as we've all talked about, there is not a room that we all go in where we are not taken off to the side to talk about let me tell you about that student after, or let me tell you what that teacher endured last week. And it is, again, foundational to the day-to-day experience that our teachers are having, that our families are having, that our kids are having. And so you have partners in this board, and I want to thank the board for continuing to prioritize this in our budget memo, as the commissioner referenced a little while ago, to make sure that this to me is root work here. Like, we can't do a lot of the other stuff if we don't prioritize this work. And so just want to thank you and the team sitting behind you as well, who are, I hate to use this because it's going to sound like a pun, who really seem like you're about to hit the street with a lot of, but when you look at that timeline, it does appear you guys are ready to launch a lot of stuff, right? Like, you are going to be in, whether it's in person or training or LMS, there's a lot of stuff that's about to happen that hopefully will help support the field in their day-to-day experiences. And hopefully we can continue a dialogue to see how that's going, and just to hear that we are being responsive, because I think that is the goal, I think, of this board, is to try to prioritize the needs of the field, and this clearly is top of the list. And so thank you guys for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think as Maria was saying and Amy was saying as part of her presentation, the power of early childhood education to deliver on the social and emotional learning, which is what we do best when we're getting it right. And if we can't, and when we build that foundation successfully in early childhood, it is a school and life benefit. But without intervening in some places and giving educators the support and skills they need and support for the young people in their classrooms, then we miss that opportunity that our system provides. So thanks, everyone. We are just a few minutes from concluding. So what we wanted to just spend the last few minutes of the meeting doing is kind of a mid-year review. The board had a strategic planning retreat in August, and during that retreat we did a lot of different things. So looked at the horizon over 5 years that will inform our strategic action plan, but we also spent some time culling down. It doesn't seem like we really culled it down very much, but identifying some of the key initiatives, projects, and priorities for this fiscal year. We are halfway through the fiscal year, so we thought it would be an important opportunity to just remind everyone what we said we were going to work on this year, what would be the agency and the board's priorities, where we are on those, and then we'll share a little bit about what that looks like at the board meeting level for all of us. So these are, of course, organized by the board's the board and the agency's 5 strategic action priorities and objectives. So family access, program stability,
program quality and workforce support. Actually, we should have had the slide with all the words on it. I realized like this must be the first deck that we don't. And then agency infrastructure, which is our fifth priority, which is making sure that we have the foundation and the structure and the capacity of talent to be able to deliver on our strategic priorities. So some of these you've already heard about, and you can see our little key is associated with things that we've at least met our 25 goal on. And I want to just spend a second on that because every one of these is a multi-year effort, something we may probably started in a previous fiscal year, we're continuing to work on. One of the things we talked about at the board meeting was we've unpacked a lot of things, we've started a lot of things, and the ability to kind of dig in, go deeper, and go further. So we sort of think about what's happened in our in 25 as meeting that goal. But for example, we've implemented the new CCFA program contracts effective October 1, but that's really part of a multi-year long-term reform of our childcare financial assistance system. And so we are hitting important milestones in 25, but the work, including operationalizing the policies that reflect the regulations, is in process. And still, we implemented some of those, but we have further to go. Since we last met, maybe, we have selected a vendor to build our new family-facing family portal for childcare financial assistance. We're going to update you on that in March. So again, what's that 25 goal was to kind of bring a vendor in to be able to do that work. Obviously, the goals of what we're trying to accomplish will cross multiple fiscal years. Family Friend and Neighbor Care, we're working on that. That'll be at an upcoming board meeting. And we've been hearing a lot from our CFCE partners, and one of our goals this year was to really think about how we support those 411 agencies. Is that what Audrey's? Is that our four? I think that was exactly right, and making sure that families know who to call in each community. What I won't need to go into each of them in great detail, but you can see, some of one of the things I found useful about this chart is where we had check marks and where we had in process, and sort of opportunity for the agency to think about, do we need additional capacity, or are there different resources that we need to make sure we're hitting program quality as much as we are program stability, or maybe they're kind of connected, that we really need to do family access and program stability in order to be able to really advance our program quality initiatives. So we have licensing regulations underway. As you know, we continue to support improvements to our background record check process, retiring old systems, and cleaning up old data and moving into new systems. And we've had great. Today you took action on student loan repayment. We thought you might, so we'll check mark on that one. So excited to be able to move that one forward. And then obviously at the agency infrastructure level, we do have this board, and the agency has our strategic action plan for 26 to 30 coming up that we'll be working on with all of you. We did publish our KPIs, or key performance indicators, which was a big milestone for this fiscal year. And we are close to launching our new data advisory commission and working on our family advisory committee too. So it was a good exercise for us at the agency and at the executive team level to kind of walk through where we were on the things that we committed to for this year, and where do we still have additional work to go. I will just fast forward to sort of what it looks like on the board agendas for each of you. The items that are in bold have already come to the board in some version, but probably many of them will also come back to you. So for example, I think we're going to be, we came to the board with changes around the C3 program for this year, but we will be coming back to you around changes for the next fiscal year. We are looking forward to updating you on the educator credential and that work that's been underway. Again, the CFCs, I know all of you are interested in hearing more about that, and you also have updates and progress on both sets of childcare and residential licensing regulations to look forward to in the months ahead. I think I'll stop there and see, are there things that you expected to see on here, or progress that you were expecting to see that you didn't, or things that you'd like to see us prioritize for board meetings or work over the next half fiscal year?
I would just, oh, sorry.
No, you go first.
I was just gonna say, the amount of progress that's been made is incredible. And so there's things on here that I wanted to see but didn't expect would be able to be accomplished, but it has been. So kudos to you and the entire team.
Thanks. Yeah. The team.
I completely agree. And I'd like to add too that one thing that I think would be helpful to see for me, knowing that vouchers are currently closed, is continued tracking of enrollment and, the different prototypes of like whether it's DCF or voucher or DTA referrals or, what's happening
What's
there
happening.
with families, how many new families are we seeing or not?
And the wait list.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
agreed. That's-
have.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the same thing, just given where we know that we've been wanting to keep a close watch on that. And as we think about future investment for the department, just thinking about how we can focus them there. And then also just the continuing issue of affordability for market rate families, just given that we know that most families are not receiving subsidies and that we have the highest childcare in the nation. Just have to bring it up. But want to echo also the thanks for all of the amazing work. I mean, it's been a great year, and thank you to all for all this wonderful work.
So definitely, I'm ongoing interest in sort of tracking what's happening in the caseloads and affordability for families outside of the eligibility, and which is something the task force has also been focused on and thinking about as well. So happy to add that future meeting.
I think I would appreciate the KPI dashboard kind of comeback series because it touches on some of those questions, indicators, tracking elements, even though it's not done or it has more to go. But that's a really helpful touch point for conversation.
Yeah.
And it was a really effective presentation. I was looking at last slide, this slide, and as an observation, but I couldn't find a place where the mental health training, capacity building, which maybe goes right at program quality, maybe goes at capacity building. But my gut is that's one of several elements that it's just happening, I think, as you say, Amy, and it's you can't fit it all on that pretty little Price is Right wheel up there. But that said, it seems pretty mission critical to the whole.
Yeah, I realized that too, and
Everything.
obviously so essential. We were like, we need to come to the board with and update
Yeah.
them on what we're doing. And then I was like, oh yeah,
Just an observation. Yeah.
We'll make sure it's there. And your idea of sort of coming back regularly around the KPIs,
Exactly.
so you're seeing what's happening on a regular basis, which was really the purpose of those, was sort of some
Yeah.
operational insight from the board into sort of the ongoing operations of the agency. So something we can kind of figure out how to connect. Either it's summarizing it at the beginning of a meeting or linking to it or some other way. Yeah. Other thoughts for us or people?
No, I would just add appreciation. I had the same observation on as I was listening to this presentation today,
Right.
which seems so just foundational to what all of these like.
Mental health is
Yeah,
everything.
yeah, and so
it is. Yeah.
But I can recall back to even the retreat and looking at this saying, well, that's a lot, right? And a lot has already been done and we're
Yeah.
halfway through. And, I was looking at this and residential licensing and childcare came before us last year as it's going through the process. So it has come, like a lot has come before the board, and just appreciative of the fact that to me, whether it's the CFCEs in particular or the dashboards, like the department's being very responsive to what they're hearing in the field, which I think is so critically important and is also not always captured.
Sure.
But we're being responsive to what we're hearing and trying to create that communication thread with folks that are doing the work every day in combination with this board, in combination with your department and the governor and the legislature. And there's a lot to do, and this team continues to just be able to do a lot. And it's just nice to take stock halfway through the year to see the progress that we've made and where we're headed. And you can see the interconnectedness of all the work that we're doing and continue to do. And so just, we send a lot of gratitude, I think, to you, Commissioner, and your team, because it's well-deserved, because of the work that you guys are getting up every single day to do on behalf of children and families. And so, thank you.
Thank you. I think we all feel pretty fortunate to have a board who's so supportive of our work, and I don't think we would have made nearly the progress if it weren't for this board's support and the leadership. So, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, with that, I'd make a motion to adjourn. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We will see you in February in the Framingham area.
Yes.
Thank you.
We don't have a place yet there?